Hello, this is Ruslan Belov with you. Yesterday, after the strike on Sumy, the old senile Keith Kellogg crawled out and declared that the Russian strike had crossed all boundaries of decency, gone beyond all limits, and so on. And then, last night, the Americans struck the capital of Yemen. 6 dead, 20 wounded. My question is, will Keith Kellogg say anything about this? Will he claim that the US military has crossed all boundaries of decency and gone beyond all permissible limits? No, of course not. This is different after all. I can't stand hypocrites. Well, let's continue analyzing the situation on the front lines. Opening the map. Yesterday there was a powerful strike on Sumy, hitting a building where soldiers from the 117th Territorial Defense Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces were being awarded. This was confirmed by several Ukrainian officials. Suddenly, it turns out that a military formation was taking place there, and even the head of the Sumy Oblast Military Administration, the Governor General Anokin, was present. By the way, as reported in Ukrainian telegram channels, he shamefully fled after the strike and didn't even try to help the wounded. Additionally, in the footage that was published, a military pickup truck with symbols used by the Ukrainian armed forces in Kursk Oblast was spotted. In short, intelligence did its job, reported the target, and the strike was carried out. Civilians were only slightly affected, which is, of course, unfortunate. As for the military casualties, everyone is keeping quiet for now. Seems they've all swallowed their tongues. The only source I could find was a Turkish newspaper, which reported that the strike killed 39 Ukrainian soldiers, including 12 officers. Today, we also received information that the commander of the 27th Artillery Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces was killed in the strike. But let's wait for the official report from the Ministry of Defense and compare the data. We'll probably be able to estimate an average figure. Now, let's move on to the frontline overview. We'll start with the Kharkiv Oblast. Fighting continues for the village of Kamyanka, the last settlement preventing the consolidation of 2 bridgeheads on the right bank of the Oskil River into a single unbroken front line. As you can see, most of the village is already under Russian control. Only the northern part of Kamyanka remains to be cleared. Additionally, this sector of the front, south of Kupiansk, deserves special attention. Thanks to the advance towards Bohuslavka, the army has finally begun clearing this pocket between Lozova and Bohuslavka, though this was expected to happen months ago. But as you know, almost everything in Kharkiv Oblast, except the Dvorishna bridgehead, has been stagnant. The front is far more dynamic in the Lyman direction. Yesterday, another push was made, 1.5 kilometers forward, this time from Katarinivka towards Novomikhailivka. So here's Katarinivka and here's Novomikhailivka. The advance to the eastern outskirts of the village, as I said, was 1.5 kilometers, and troops have entered Novomikhailivka. Fighting is ongoing there now. Overall, as you can see, the village is very small, so the battles likely won't last long. The Ukrainian garrison has little to hold on to here. What's interesting is what comes next, because here we're already in Kharkiv Oblast. The next village, Novy Mir, just 2 kilometers from Novomikhailivka, is no longer in Donetsk Oblast, but in Kharkiv Oblast. It'll be interesting to see how the situation develops here and what the Ukrainian command does, since their front is clearly collapsing in this area. Moving on, another interesting development is the continued advance in the Siversk direction, particularly north of Verkhnokamianske. Here, troops managed to push forward by, let's measure, about 2.5 kilometers. That's very good progress. Now, from these positions, it's only 4.5 kilometers to the city of Siversk itself. Of course, I should clarify, despite the proximity, 4.5 kilometers seems very close, an assault on the city is still a long way off. However, this improved positioning now allows for active FPV drone strikes on the city, targeting hidden equipment, artillery positions, and troop concentrations. In short, life for the Ukrainian garrison in Siversk just got much harder. Moving on, not much to say about Chasiv Yar. A full year of fighting in the city and complete capture is still a long way off. I think the assault on Chasiv Yar will be the most unfortunate chapter of this war. We discussed Toretsk in detail yesterday, but there's already one change worth noting, the advance toward Dylivka. And not just from Druzhba, as we talked about yesterday, but also from Azaryanivka. Here's the area. The depth of the advance is still small, about 700 meters, but considering the simultaneous push from Druzhba, it's clear that Delivka is now one of the priority targets. The situation is far more optimistic on Toretsk's western flank. The Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF, haven't managed to redeploy reserves here yet, so their defenses continue to crumble. And honestly, with major problems now emerging on Pokrovsk's eastern flank, which we'll discuss later, the UAF command has to decide where to send reinforcements, here or there. I doubt they have enough reserves for every sector. Plus, the Lyman direction is collapsing, as we already covered. So what's happening here? Let's switch to the maps from Ukrainian deep state. Surprisingly, this time, they updated their map faster than even the Russian ones. After the army took control of Alexandropol and Pantelemonivka, the advance continued north. The UAF held out here for about a week, but under pressure, their lines began to collapse. As a result, they've already been pushed out of Valentinivka, and Deep State has even colored the southern part of the village red, indicating full Russian control, while the rest is marked as a gray zone. We know what the gray zone means in Deep State's terms. The UAF is no longer there. Moreover, the gray zone has now reached the next settlement, Suka Balka, and not just reached it, it's already taken about half the village. This can only mean one thing. Russian assault groups have begun fighting for this critically important village. And if the assault succeeds, which I believe it will, the UAF's defensive line, established back in 2014, long before the full-scale war, will be breached. What does this mean? First, this pocket will be fully cleared. But that's not the worst part for the UAF. The real danger is what comes next, an immediate push 5 kilometers toward Romanivka. As you can see, movement is already being detected near the highway, and in the broader context, this poses a major long-term threat to Kostiantynivka. Essentially, reaching these positions and blockading Kostiantynivka is now the Russian army's main objective in this sector. Now let's move to Pokrovsk's eastern flank. There was one important development here yesterday. Russian troops broke through Ukrainian defenses in Yelizavetivka in a single strike, completely driving out the UAF. For context, there were 2 previous attempts to take this village. The first was back in winter. I posted footage in my Telegram channel showing a column of armored vehicles, about a dozen, trying to enter the village. They briefly succeeded, but were pushed back. Now, however, they've not only entered but taken full control, in one decisive push. The next moves will be toward Malinivka and Mirolyubivka. And again, as I said earlier, the UAF command now faces a dilemma. Where do they send reserves? Which sectors do they sacrifice? And where do they concentrate their forces? Finally, the last notable development today is the 2-kilometer advance from Berlatske toward Shevchenko. The same Shevchenko that holds huge lithium reserves. As you can see, the village is now fully blockaded from the east, and in the very near future, possibly even today, we should expect troops to enter and begin assault operations. Novopavlivka direction, April 14. In the center grouping zone, fighting continues in the inter-river area. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to resist in Kotlyarivka. Russian forces have entered the village from the south and east, but Ukrainian troops remain entrenched in its northwestern part. Since this is the last settlement before the Soliona River, and in this sector, holding positions against drones is only possible by relying on villages, our forces have learned to neutralize UAF strongpoints in tree lines. The UAF command is funneling reserves here, and despite losses, is forcing its troops to hold these positions. In the Troitske-Orikhiv sector, Russian units have taken the first settlement and are preparing to assault the second. West of Bodanivka, there is movement in a general southwestern direction. Overall, the UAF grouping here is substantial. Elements of 6 brigades have been spotted, which is why progress has been extremely difficult. On the Sumy tragedy, Yuri Podolyak and several prominent Ukrainian officials stated that the authorities had organized a military celebration in the city center, bringing entire families along. The UAF gathering was held in one of Sumy's central buildings, a congress center where an awards ceremony took place. Reports suggest the information was leaked. Once again, the military held an event in a civilian facility, in an area typically crowded with hundreds of civilians. As usual, no one warned civilians that the area was dangerous and could be targeted. Former Ukrainian MP Ihor Moseichuk also commented, stating that the Russian strike on Sumy may have been aimed at the award ceremony for soldiers of the 117th Territorial Defense Brigade. According to him, the event, organized by regional authorities, involved civilians, including children. Deputy Bazula had previously mentioned the planned ceremony, suggesting the leak may have occurred due to open invitations being circulated. Pokrovsk direction. Near Kotlin, the situation is favorable. The UAF has not counterattacked. Meanwhile, the northeastern part of Shevchenko has shifted into the grey zone from the Belgika side. Pressure on the UAF here remains relentless, with extremely heavy fighting ongoing. The neighboring village of Lysivka is almost entirely under Russian control. On the eastern flank, Russian forces have pushed the UAF out of positions beyond the Kazyony Toretsk River and are now advancing toward fortified areas near Malinivka and Murin. The clock is ticking for Iran. An article with this headline was published in Politico. It reports that Donald Trump has given Iran a 60-day deadline to show progress in nuclear negotiations, or face potential military retaliation. 4 sources confirmed this to the outlet. From Iran's perspective, this is seen as a deliberate stalling tactic, allowing it to advance its nuclear program while improving its image in the eyes of the international community, said Jonathan Panikoff, a former U.S. intelligence officer and Middle East security analyst at the Atlantic Council. Dan Shapiro, a former senior Pentagon official and U.S. ambassador to Israel, warned that Iran could retaliate if the U.S. or Israel takes military action. Closing, that's all for today's Frontline update. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this report.